According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, advanced education is associated with a higher income. On average, obtaining a master's degree has the potential to increase the income by 16% to 44%. An increasing number of professional workers have obtained or currently are pursuing an advanced degree after a bachelor's. Nowadays, it is getting harder to stand out in the job market without an advanced or terminal degree. However, a longer time spent in school also means a heavier financial burden and less experience in the industry. So, is it really worth it to pursue a doctorate degree? Hello my friends, welcome back to my channel. This is Dr. Ming. In my channel, I do a variety of lifestyle videos and academic videos. Before we start, don't forget to subscribe to this channel and ring the notification bell, and let's get into the video. I got my doctorate degree in the field of education about a year ago. So it has been a year since I graduated my PhD degree program. And I think it's pretty worth it for me to share my experience with you if you're considering applying for graduate school or PhD degree. Is a graduate degree really worth it? So when we talk about whether the PhD degree worth it or not, we're looking at three things. The first thing is whether the experience worth it. The second thing is what I gained from my PhD degree. The third thing will be money, because eventually it's an investment and you want to see some monetary gain eventually, because a degree should generate you a job that generate you an income. So let's first talk about experience. The first thing I want to talk about in experience is which college or which graduate school you're applying to. A lot of times people have this fantasy over Ivy League schools or like super selective schools. Those are also, if you go to Harvard, their campus is like amazing. The actual campus itself actually matters. If you go to a campus that's like in the middle of nowhere and the weather is terrible with, I don't know, like seasonal disasters, it could be a little bit tricky compared to if you go to one of those really nice campuses. So that could be one of the experience, but hold on. Experience means more than that. A lot of times between choosing a prestigious school versus professor, I would choose professor. I didn't go to one of those prestigious universities. I actually went to my local university, which is really affordable for one, and it's in a city. My university is in a city where there are thousands of jobs. So during your studies, you can actually get internships somewhere, building a relationship and building a network, and after you graduate, you can actually land a local job, which is very nice. But if you go to one of those college towns, which could be nice, but it also limits the network that you're building. It also limits the internships. You always have to go out of your city for these opportunities. So that is one. The second one is your professor means so much more than the actual fame of the university. So you could go to a really prestigious university and being neglected by your professor, or you could go to a university that I went to but had amazing professors. I felt like I was getting a really good experience even though I didn't have an opportunity to go to Ivy League. So I have an amazing professor and she's been so awesome and she cares about her students from all aspects of life. Really motivational every time I see my professor. Being a graduate student, your leading professor, your academic advisor, your mentor professor, it's so much more important than which school you went to. During my PhD studies, I went to a lot of conferences and I've been socially networking with a lot of people. And some of the graduate students, they share that even though they went to a very prestigious university, their professor was so busy with their own project, they have very little time to mentor them. So they felt like they didn't get the benefits, versus my professors are so amazing and I actively participated in a lot of really great research projects. I learned so much. It also helps me to enrich my curriculum vitae, have a lot of experience in data analysis. I was lucky enough to be selected to the US Department of Education. All these accomplishments I had, I wouldn't have done it without the amazing professors in my university. So finding a great mentor is way more important than getting a better rankings, because those ranks are just ranked by someone else, but your experience is what you actually experience. So choosing a great professor is gonna help you to not to stress out, to actually get a lot of help and get a lot of experience, to have a lot of projects going, and to really help you to publish more and present more, learn more, not just like reading, but also like the actual experience you get in research and teaching. So choosing a professor is so much more important than choosing a university. So I had amazing mentors who's motivating me, encouraging me to really help me to aspire for more and have high expectations for myself. The third experience is the class experience. So it really depends on you, which professor and what the curriculum is, I guess, because some of the classes you're just listening versus other classes are more seminar style. I really prefer the seminar style that we had in our university. So again, it's like a trade-off. I know some universities, you take a lot of other courses from other departments. So in a way, you're able to social more and really broaden your knowledge. But in those classes, you're really taking classes with like other departments, and for example, master's students, doctoral students from all different departments or different colleges. So of course, this class size is a little bit bigger compared to in my program. It's cohort based. So we have 12 people in my cohort. So the first 2 years, the majority of the courses I took with my cohort. So it's like 12 people class, small class size. So every class I spoke up, I had questions, I got answered immediately. We were able to collaborate, discuss. Everything is like so active, and I really appreciate that. Versus some other universities, it's not so much of a cohort base. It's really everybody taking this class, everybody taking other class. In that case, sometimes you do take a class with 30 people, and I felt like the smaller class seminar type of class to me was really good experience to not just learn, but also to practice, to speak academically, to write academically, to be able to present, to be able to lead discussions and things like that. So a lot of the things I learned were from these cohort-based class experiences. So the curriculum and the courses are really important as well. So to me, was my degree worth it? Definitely. I love the city, I love my professors, and I love my classes. So definitely really worth it. Experience, it's really worth it. I felt like it's worth it to spend 4 years of my life being in my department because it feels like a big family. Even though I didn't make much, I was happy every single day. And I felt like my life was so fulfilled and I was making progress every single day. First, we talk about experience. The second, let's talk about what I learned being a PhD student. First thing I learned is research skills. In bachelor programs, we mainly learn from professors and textbooks. It's more about like learning, interpreting, and applying. In masters, maybe we learn a little bit about research and sometimes we do thesis. But in PhD program, it's research, and research. Basically, everything you learn is to inspire you to think what type of research you want to do, how you can use research to make a difference in real life. For example, I am a big fan of big data research, using the national represented data to make inferences about what is the most effective policies to help students, what are the most effective ways to help students. And I'm also a big fan of testing assessment. I wanted to know whether different tests are equal, whether tests are really unfair to the student. I felt like a lot of the research that I'm interested in can really make a difference for other people's lives. Graduate school in general is to learn about theories that can generate research. Now I can use the research skills to apply in real life. I can research about housing market, I can research about stock market. Research is defined as systematic inquiry of a phenomenon. So I felt like a lot of times research is a term that's misused in daily lives. You Googling something, it's not research. Research refers to systematic inquiry of something. It's usually data-driven. So you reading a blog online on Google, it's not really like research. A lot of times, we make decisions based on one blog that we read, and then we think something's gonna happen. Sometimes we have this interpretation of the social phenomenon because this one piece of news. But being a researcher really helps me to be more mindful and be more critical in interpreting what I consume every day. Google is not research, but Google Scholar is, because it's peer-reviewed, right? So you want to systematically examine the same thing. So you could design your daily experimental design by controlling the majority of the factors and manipulate one factor to see the effect of one factor in the overall result. That is one experimental research that you can do. at home. Or you can do systematic inquiry by like literature reviewing. So you should be able to find out information, but also to systematically inquire the validity of the evidence, the validity of that information. There are going to be right and left in social media that's more like political biased, and when you report the same item, there are different opinions, and you hear the title, you see that, like, oh my gosh, this is gonna happen, oh, the world is gonna come to an end. The world is not gonna come to an end if you study this phenomenon systematically, historically, to see what has been going on from the past, and using the past data to predict the future occurrences. So I felt like research skills has been so helpful, and it's also really helpful for me to land the current job. So the first thing I learned is research. Second thing I learned is writing skills. Writing skills are so important and so lacking, I think. A lot of times we learned writing in terms of like texting people. When you're doing research articles, you're trying to write persuasively to others. So it's a type of persuasion. Really doesn't matter eventually whether you become a professor academia or you're like me, become a full-time data analyst to write reports, or if you want to write blogs or things like that. At the end of the day, you want to write to persuade. You write to convey a message. And being in this PhD program really helps me to write more concise, more clear, and more persuasive. So there are different ways of writing the story. Sometimes you want to be general, and sometimes you want to be specific, because one specific story can really change how people think, versus if you're making general statements, sometimes you don't want to give out too much information. So again, I felt like my biggest gain from this PhD program is writing skills. And people are like, oh, after you graduate, you're not gonna write. Look, maybe in some professions, maybe you don't have to write, but it turned out that the majority of the professions that happen in the office, you just have to write. Like if you become a law clerk, you have to write. If you become a secretary, you have to write. If you become a teacher, you have to write. If you become a researcher, you have to write a report. Being in this PhD program really teaches me how to write more effectively in different occasions, really, how to write an email, how to write step-by-step instructions to my assistant, how to communicate with my boss in a more clear, concise, but also respectful way. During this PhD program, it's not just like writing publications, it goes beyond that, because there are many things you have to communicate, and usually people forgive you for mistakes in the PhD program, because one time I forgot to copy the professor, and the professor was like, okay, next time you need to be careful. But of course, there's more forgiveness when you're a student and that's your teacher. You're like, oh, next time, versus in real life, you forgot to copy a very important person, that person may really get mad. So I think I've learned a lot of hard lessons, soft skills, and hard skills in my PhD program. The next skill I learned is networking skills. A lot of times people have this idea of PhD students just live in a cave under the rock, which is true, but eventually you have to sell your research ideas, you have to sell your presentations, you have to sell to get the grant, because when you get a grant, you can fund your research. So I was lucky enough to get a dissertation grant that funded my dissertation research. And one of the things is, of course, writing and persuasion. And the other thing is you have to learn how to network with people. For example, you go to different conferences, you want to know who are those people, because in the future, they may be the hiring committee for your job opportunities, right? You want to network with people for collaborations, for future job opportunities, and knowing information about different grants, because sometimes if you just live under the cave, you don't know there are like 5 grants that's like calling for proposals. You have to network with your students and professors, and they may let you know, oh, by the way, there's this, right? But if you're not networking with people, then you really live under a cave, because you have to write your dissertation. During my PhD studies, I went to so many conferences. I am an introvert, so networking with people is such a burden on me, but I learned like when you don't know what to say, what type of conversation you want to have, you want to do some research about this person and then ask them about book that they wrote or the article that they wrote, and they can get really, really hyped up because they were like, oh, you're interested in my work, and they can go on and on and on and on, and you can actually start to have like meaningful conversations about things, not so much about like so awkward what we're gonna talk about. Hi, today's kind of hot, right? Yeah, so networking skills is so important, and I learned so much during my PhD studies because I was lucky enough to be funded to go to different conferences, training opportunities, and like trying to make academic friends and looking for collaborations and communicate with them for collaborations. And these are great experiences and later can be transferable to other jobs as well. The next thing I learned is collaboration skills, because most of the research are collaborative because you don't want to do the whole thing, and a lot of times you're working in a lab under your leading professor, so you need to collaborate with other lab teammates and you write the paper together. And I've seen a lot of people collaborate together to just sit and talk and not very efficient, I guess, not very productive. So during my PhD studies, I learned so much about how to collaborate with others. At first, I think there were some disagreement and some people may not like me because I came out blunt, because I was like too honest and straightforward with my opinion. I think it's also like cultural difference in our communication skills, because like in Chinese it wouldn't sound that bad, but in my second language it may sound really blunt. Eventually I learned, of course there are more forgiveness here as students, as peers, compared to like going to like a cutthroat working environment, right? So eventually I learned that during collaborations you need to listen and listen and listen. It's more effective for you to say one thing than like if you are trying to take the lead, because sometimes people don't like to be told what to do, versus if you have them to go on and on and on and you just say one thing, they'll be like, oh yeah, that's a valid point. Another thing I learned is to ask questions. Instead of telling people what to do or what you think they should do, maybe think, what do you think of this? Do you think it will help if we do this? What do you think of adding this? How about, so maybe asking questions instead of like, I think we should do this. I always do that and people don't like it. So a lot of times it's communication skills, right? But the other times is how do you divide the work effectively, how to coordinate with different people, and how to divide the work more equally, and how to have 3 people working on the same thing, but it's more united, it's more like the similar fashion, and at the end it looks like it's a product of one, not so much of 3 people. So these are really good skills that I learned, and I felt like a lot of times in the workforce people are not trained to do that, and there are a lot of like miscommunications or conflicts that can be easily resolved. But again, academia or schools, I think it's more forgiving for you to make mistakes. So definitely I learned so much in collaborating. The next one, of course, is productive habits, because you'll have to read so much, write so much, and at the same time work. And it's just like I have to work so much, and eventually you just learn you have to work smarter, not harder. How do you finish 3 hours of a work in 2 hours? How do you finish 3 months of writing in 3 weeks? An example of this is that like qualified exam, right? We all take similar exam, but some departments they allow people 1 month. Some departments they allow people 3 months. My department allow us 1 week. Eventually I did it in 1 week. But if I could do it in 1 week, why do I want to drag it for 3 months? Eventually, I felt like people who spent 3 months in their qualified exam are way more miserable than me, who were stressed out for the week, but it's good after a week, right? So if you can finish 3 months of a work in 3 weeks, don't drag it for 3 months. So one thing that I learned so much about productivity and time management is during my PhD studies, because I want to be able to use my time smartly. If I am better writer in the morning, I spend 2 hours writing every single day, and then I reply emails, I have some social contacts with emails, and maybe like do some lesson preparation, and maybe do my reading in the afternoon, and maybe do some reading in the evenings when I'm more chilled. So again, it really depends on the nature of the task and also the overall how I feel. But so I try to complete the same work within less time so I can have more time for my YouTube video. So that's just one thing that I learned from my PhD program as well, because you have so much to do. But the good thing about PhD program is it's more flexible. You just have to go to school to do labs or do teaching, or you just have to go to school to like do certain office hours, and then you can have control of your time. When you have a control of your time, you can think about how to use it more wisely, more efficiently, more productively. So I definitely really enjoyed my years in my PhD school. So the last thing I learned is growth mindset. During my studies, I came across with this idea of growth mindset. I learned it in my educational psychology class. So basically, growth mindset is versus a fixed mindset. It's basically proposed by a professor from Stanford. And the original theory is basically for child development. As a teacher, as a parent, how do we cultivate the growth mindset of our child? But eventually it just grows on me. before I started this PhD program, I used to see myself as being a dumb person with a soul reflex and not really good in writing. So I took a test before I came to United States. My reading, listening, really great. Speaking, pretty okay. My writing score is like... I just know that I have soul reflex. I used to think myself as a low achieving kid. Even though I have achieved a lot as a kid, as a student in the past, I always felt like I'm dumber than the other kids. I don't know. I just had a very low self-esteem in the past, especially in the GT program, in the competitive math. Although my math skills was higher than the majority of kids in school, but in my class, my math skill was like the last. So that's hurt my self-esteem as well. But during the PhD studies, because of encouragement of my professors, I start to uncover the unlimited potential of myself. I felt like I could do anything because I can. You can just teach yourself doing every single thing. You can be a good writer. You can train yourself to be a good writer. You can train yourself to be a good teacher. You can train yourself to be a content creator. Maybe not the best, but the idea of that is that I no longer see my skills as static because I never saw myself being a doctor, like with a doctorate degree. So to me, it's not just about the degree itself, but also the idea of achieving things throughout the years in my PhD studies is teaching myself a lesson, is that knowledge and potentials and talents are not static. You may not be born to be an athlete, but you can train yourself to do the things you want to do. So one example is that I got a dissertation grant, right? Before that, I used to think that only very, very smart kids can get a dissertation grant, or you have to graduate from Harvard, Stanford. Because when I was applying for the grant, I'm competing with international, I'm competing internationally. I'm competing with people who graduate from Stanford, UCLA, University of Minnesota, Michigan State. I'm competing with a lot of great students coming from prestigious schools. But eventually I got the grant, and that's when I realized you don't have to go to those expensive schools. You don't have to go to those prestigious schools. You don't have to be born smart. You just have to work smart and seek for mentorship and try to improve every single thing slowly but steadily, and eventually you are going to grow and you are going to achieve things that you were never imagining yourself to achieve. So I felt like that is the biggest thing I learned from my PhD studies, is that I achieved a growth mindset. I felt like I can do anything if I put my mind to it. It's probably gonna take me longer because I'm not as smart as other people, but eventually you can. So I think in that sense, I think my PhD degree is totally worth it. It's totally worth the experience, and it's totally worth because I learned so much from this program. Not so much about the knowledge itself, but also from the mindset perspective and from the experience perspective. From the friendship and network skills, the hard skills I learned, the statistics skills, the use of software, the soft skills such as time management, such as collaboration, such as communication, such as writing skills. So last one is the money side. The money side is a little bit sad. I think one thing that I heard is that people think that people with a doctorate degree, they always make a lot of money. People have this misconception of having a high degree means more money. It doesn't make sense. Advanced degree in education makes less than a bachelor degree in computer science, and that it is what it is, because education is a non-profit field. If you compare all of the majors in college, education make significantly lower compared to all the other majors, except for social work and maybe museum management. Those are all non-profit. You make profit, you can make more monetary gain, right? If you don't make profit, you don't make as much monetary gain, right? So if you're taking a degree, even if you have a doctorate degree in the field of education or social science, you just may not make as much money compared to having a computer science degree, electronic engineering, because they're creating capitals, they're producing capitals, right? Similarly, if you become a doctor, right? If you're becoming a family physician compared to a surgeon, of course you pay way more to do a surgery compared to just routine check. So of course a surgeon will make more money than the family physician. So it really depends on how much capitals you produce. So a lot of times when people see my PhD, they're like, you probably make a lot of money. You're probably rich. I'm just so lucky I don't have student loans, but I'm in a very privileged position because I don't have to pay for the tuition. But I just remember before I applied for the PhD degree, before I applied for the PhD program, my mentor professor, she said, if you can get scholarship, fellowship, don't, even if you're admitted, don't go, don't take it, because you will be in debt eventually after graduate. You're just not gonna pay up that student loan. Definitely money-wise, it depends on the field, of course. If you're in finance, of course, you make more than education. Your computer science, you make more than education. As we progress in academic careers, we're narrowing the focus of our studies to be the expert in a very specific area. So in other words, as you progress from bachelor's to master's to PhD, you identify your little single narrow niche. But it also means that you're narrowing your job market choices. So most likely we go for jobs like assistant professors, like lecturers and things like that, or we try to get those tenure track positions. But the problem is you have to go to a place where there's a university that there is a tenure track position. So in my case, I have to stay in this city because my husband lives here, his family lives here, right? His career is here, and I have to stay here. To me, it feels like having a PhD degree money-wise is not so much worth it, because eventually my choice is very narrow. Like there is one job opening here and there are like 100 people waiting, because a lot of people, they're also stuck here because their husband, their spouse, their family members are here. There is very limited number of job openings because usually people, they don't retire until they're in their age of 70 or 80, right? So the tenure track positions are very scarce. Very hard to land a dream job to be a tenure track position unless you're open to move, unless you're saying, oh, there is a place in Arizona, I'll go. If there's a place in California, I'll go. It doesn't matter if you want to live in California. It doesn't matter if you want to live in like Florida. It doesn't matter if there's a job in the middle of the mountain, you go, because that's your dream job. You have less choices if you're wanting to be staying in the field of academia, because you have to be willing to go, and your spouse, your family have to be willing to go. It's also very competitive. Previously, we had one job opening here in our university, and there are 140 PhD holders applying for the same job. So it's very, very competitive to one job. So usually like for job openings, maybe there are like 30 people apply to a job. If it closed really quickly, it may be 100, but 140 people applying for one position is pretty crazy. You have to be very cutthroat to be able to land a dream job. Alternatively, you can go to a research institute, you can go to nonprofit, you can become a teacher or lecturer. The salary could really differ. If you become a lecturer, you really don't make a lot of money. Lecturers, they don't make a lot of money. Sometimes if there is course, you teach. There's no course, you don't teach. So a lot of universities, they save money by hiring part-time lecturers. So in my profession, a course is paid between $2,000 to $4,000 per semester. So if you're paid $3,000, but each semester has 4 months, right? So you're really not making $1,000 per month. So you have to teach 4 courses in order to just make $2,000 per month. So really you're working full-time but only paid $2,000 per month. And remember, it's before tax money. You can also go to the industry, right? Pearson, ETS, go to research institute, testing institute. You can go to, there's so much research institutes, right? In different professions. I also landed a job that's not in tenure track, but a lot of times those industry, they value experience way more than the degree. For example, one of my coworker who holds exact same position, doing exactly the same thing, and he makes $20,000 more than me per year because he has more experience in the company, right? And he only has a master's degree. So I have a PhD degree, I had more research experience, higher training, but because I have less years in the industry, I make it 20K less. My 4 years of training in PhD, all those experience and trainings and all those high skills that I learned is only worth $1,500 per year, which is kind of sad. But is it still worth it? Yes. Because although my job only requires a master's degree, but it really requires like research experience and things like that. So when I applied, I got this job when competing with other master students because I had more experience in research, because I had more background knowledge in the field of education, because I had like a lot of great experience being a PhD student. Because of what I learned, and also because my experience during the studies, I was able to land this job and be more competitive in the job market. Eventually, having a PhD degree did work to my favor. But that's not because of the higher degree. That's really because of the experience I had during this degree. If you can have more years in the job market, having more experience in the job market, I think you would definitely be paid more compared to me, who had more experience. But as a student, even though my experience was valued, it really didn't count as industrial experience. So I could have made 5K more if I went ahead and got a job after my master's, versus now, even though I have a higher degree, I'm paid less because I don't have as many years in the industry. And I also looked online, like sometimes I look online to see who has openings and what are the job markets are looking like. And I saw that sometimes they require a master's degree, but if you have 7 years of experience in the industry with a bachelor's degree, you're equally qualified. So I felt like even if you have a master's degree only, but you have 7 years of in the industry doing research with analysts and things like that, you will still qualify for certain jobs. The only thing that is a gatekeeper is if you want to become a tenure track professor, right? You have to have a PhD if you want to become a tenure track professor, because how are you going to mentor a PhD student if you don't have a PhD, if you didn't go through the process yourself, right? But being in the industry, they don't care about what degree you get. They don't care about your GPA. They don't really care. In terms of money, they really care about your job experience. So even though sometimes they say PhD degree preferred, but if you have a master's degree and 7 years of research experience, you still qualify. When it comes to the degree, money-wise, it's not worth it. So I think an alternative these days is to keep your job being in the industry and work your PhD degree part-time. It's probably not beneficial for your mental health or physical health because you're going to be super tired after work and still have to do the studies and things like that. You may actually achieve your degree in 7 years instead of 4 years. It happened to some of my friends, but at the end, you have way more years in the industry. You have way more experience full-time in the industry, and it makes you way more competitive with a degree, with years of experience, with everything. Eventually, I think a PhD degree is really worth it, but it really depends on how you do it. It really depends on the experience you choose to do. It really depends on what you learn from this experience, how much you're actively seeking, how much mentorship you're actively seeking, how much opportunities you're trying to seize. And also, it also depends on how much work experience you had prior to the PhD degree or while you're doing your PhD. So it really depends on the decisions you make to maximize the benefits of the PhD degrees and the programs and the studies. Alrighty, that's it for today's video. I felt like overall, if I have a chance, I would totally do my PhD degree again. But if I had a chance, I would probably start my YouTube channel way earlier. I will probably start my YouTube channel from day one of enrolling this PhD degree. I will probably start more side hustles and part-time jobs. I'll probably look for a full-time job and also try to maybe turn my PhD studies to part-time, full-time employment and part-time studies. I felt like those are the modifications I would definitely change. If you're interested in listening to my regrets as a PhD student, please comment down below. I will see if there are people interested, and also give this video a thumbs up if you want to watch more videos like this relating to academic topics. I'm very excited to share my experience with you as well. Alright, before we go, don't forget to subscribe, ring the bell, and give this video a thumbs up for the YouTube algorithm. Make sure you personalize your bell so that you'll be notified, and also check out my other lifestyle videos and food videos. And I will see you in my next video. Bye!